My father is now 83 years old. I recently learned about his random act of kindness that happened more than 60 years ago. I worked as my mother told me the story. She began, your father will never tell you this, but I want you to know. When you and your sister were very little, your father worked in the coal mine near Alpha. It was dangerous and dirty work. One day while your dad was working his shift, a guy on the crew broke his ankle, and your father watched as others carried the fellow out of the mine. Your dad thought about that fellow with a broken ankle all during the rest of his shift. He kept thinking, how will this man feed his family this weekend the next? That day at the end of my dad's shift, he went to his boss and asked if he could work double shifts for a month or two, so the fellow with the broken ankle and his family would continue to have a weekly paycheck until he could return to work. Dad's boss said yes. Dad worked his shift, and the extra shift for a crew member he did not know much about except that he had a wife and children. Dad worked double shifts for 2 months. I had an opportunity to ask my dad about his random act of kindness. I told him he was truly a hero. Dad simply said it was the right thing to do. Now moving on to a more recent story. This hits different. Last week I was having breakfast at Chick-fil-A, and as I was sitting in my truck eating, I noticed a homeless guy sitting on the curb behind the building with his dog. He was holding a sign asking for money or food donations to help feed him and his dog. Did not look like a druggie or alkie, just an older man down on his luck. I observed him the entire time I ate my breakfast. He mostly just sat there scratching his mutt and holding the sign while people drove past ignoring them. When I finished my breakfast, I decided to make another run through the drive-thru and ordered a large chicken biscuit combo. As I was leaving, I pulled up alongside him and handed the bag of breakfast and a small bag of dog food I had in my truck for when I bring my dog to work. The bag of Chick-fil-A put a huge smile on his face. But when I handed him the bag of dog food, the guy literally lost it and started bawling right there on the side of my truck. After regaining his composure, he exclaimed that it had been so long since somebody had treated him like a human being and considered him and his dog, that he was just overwhelmed by emotion. I asked him if he would be willing to work hard for a decent day's pay, and he immediately straightened up and exclaimed that he could be the hardest worker I had ever seen. I gave him my business card and a $5 and told him to meet me at that spot the next morning, and I would put him to work. The next day I stopped in, and sure enough, he was waiting there for me. I loaded him and his dog into my truck and took them to the job site. He wasn't kidding about being a hard worker. This guy carried wood around and fetched tools out of my truck for me all day without complaining once. His dog just shadowed him the entire time. During the day, I learned about how he had lost his wife in a car accident at his home that he had lived in for 35 years, repossessed by the bank, had no children or family, was staying at a K-way campground, and had a bunch of his life possessions stolen, had been spit on by strangers while begging for money, and had all but given up on the human race as a whole. At the end of the day, I took him to my bank and withdrew his day's pay, which amounted to $80. The look on his face was well worth it. My random act of kindness seemed to put a spark back in his eye, and I continued to pick him up the rest of the week in the same spot and paying him at the end of each day. Yesterday, when I dropped him off, he asked me to take him to a different spot near the KOA. He explained with the money I paid him he was going to be able to afford camping provisions for the next couple of months, and told me how much it meant to him and his dog to not have to sleep outside on the cold ground. Another thing I might mention is that he became friends with the guys on my crew, and they brought in some used camping supplies for him. So he was all set when I left him last night. He looked like a different person than the man I saw hanging his head in shame behind Chick-fil-A. He promised me he would be there for me next week if I needed him. And although my job site is going to be on the other side of town next week, I have already decided to continue going out of my way to pick him up and put him to work. Feels good, man. Update. Sorry for never updating this. I will update here since it seems people are still actually reading this, and some have asked if I still employ Charlie. Charlie worked with me for about 3 weeks total. During the time, he didn't once complain, and every morning he was at our agreed-upon meeting spot bright-eyed and sober. After the 3rd week, he shook my hand and told me how grateful he was to me for giving him a chance to get out of the rut he was in. He informed me that he was traveling south to Florida and would be leaving on the weekend with a group of people he had met at the KOA. He never mentioned what it was he was going to Florida for, and I never asked him. I only hope that whatever it was he was looking for was waiting for him there, and I hope he is still doing better than the first day I met him. Let's move on to the next story. In my senior year of high school, a young, fresh out of college teacher taught my class. At the beginning of the year, she was very happy and excited about teaching. But very quickly, the students all began taking advantage of her friendliness. Knowing she was new, it was easy for them to manipulate her. The class without her being aware of what they were doing until it was too late. By the end of the year, she was frustrated and sad, and I overheard her telling another teacher she wasn't sure if she had chosen the right career. On the last day of school, I brought her a tray of cookies. I worked in a bakery at the time, and a note thanking her for being my teacher and telling her that I appreciated her taking the time to help me learn. She cried and told me she had been planning to quit, but that I had just changed her mind. It surprises me how it's never the big things that can move someone so much, but the small things that almost seem inconsequential. Here's another story that resonates. At my university, our lecturer struggled, doing the work of 4 people on reduced pay. He's had a shitty time as our university has cut a lot of staff, so he's single-handedly doing the work of nearly 4 people on reduced pay, as he isn't churning out the required number of research articles per year. Instead, focusing on his classes and students. He always tries to be as cheerful as he can, but we could tell it was getting him down. So during the semester, we all put a little money toward a gift for him and gave it to him at one of our final lectures. It was an engraved trophy with to name for being the best lecturer of 2012 with thanks from class, as well as a gift card to a game store. He likes his video games. He cried and told us that this was the first time any class had ever done something like this for him. Now, shifting to a different moment of kindness. One night after work, I saw a lady and her pregnant daughter waiting for a taxi that was an hour late, their cart full of groceries. They lived near my house, so I drove them home. She shared that she feared leaving her house, and this was her first outing in 5 months. She offered me money, but I helped carry their groceries and returned the cash. After a hug, she cried, saying karma would repay me. Let's jump to a heartwarming birthday story. I work in a pizza shop, and this family came in to celebrate this kid's 10th birthday. They asked if I could do something for the kid, and I said no problem. I noticed that the kid had a Pokemon shirt, and I asked the parents a few like Pokemons. That kid started rattling off all sorts of Pokemon names and such, and I knew what to do. The parents ordered what they wanted, and I told them that the kid would get a pizza made by me, and it would be on the house. I talked to my manager about my plan, and he was all cool with it. I made that kid a pokeball pizza, half marinara, half ranch with black olives that traced the lines of the pokeball. His face lit up like a Christmas tree. The father and mother were so appreciated, and the mother cried. No one was ever that nice for their son. He was so happy, it really made me feel good to know that I impacted someone's life, let alone their birthday, positively. That kid will have a good story to tell about how some nerd made him a pokeball pizza on his 10th birthday. Next up, a Thanksgiving moment. I worked at Subway at the time. It was 6:30 p.m. on Thanksgiving, and we were closing early at 7 o'clock for the holiday. A middle-aged woman came in and told me she wanted a turkey sub. I start making her sandwich and was making casual small talk. She started crying as she was telling me what she wanted. I asked what was wrong, and she told me she had no one to spend Thanksgiving with, and this was a turkey dinner. I felt so bad for her. She was openly sobbing in the middle of the store. I took off my gloves, walked around the counter, and gave her a hug. She collapsed on my shoulder and just wept for about 5 minutes while I told her it was okay and to cry all she needed to. Eventually, I finished making her sandwich. We get to where she's about to pay, and I tell her not to worry about it and ring it up as my employee meal. She started crying happy tears this time and thanked me a lot. She sat down and ate her food. As she's about to leave, I rush up to her and give her another hug. She thanks me again and leaves the store. I saw her again a few months later, and she looked much happier. I still regret not inviting her to eat Thanksgiving dinner with me, though. Now moving to a small but meaningful gesture. One day I was in line at the generic Chinese cafeteria near my office building. It was almost the end of the day, and I was enjoying my half-hour off in between my 2 full-time jobs. An older woman stepped into line behind me. We were about to the ordering spot, and I saw her glance into her wallet, look around, sigh, and turn to leave. I gently touched her arm and asked if she would like me to buy her dinner. She got very teary-eyed and tried to decline, but I insisted. She insisted after we ordered that I sit down with her in the little cafeteria area and dinner, so I accepted. She said it had been a very hard day for her, and that having a random stranger offer to buy her food was the nicest thing anyone had done for her in a while. Here's a story about my brother. A few years ago, Fable 3 came out on the Xbox. I know it was October because my brother's birthday is then anyway. He comes home from school, bursts into my room, and asks me if he can watch me play. He would always do that when I got a game, sit down, watch, and once I was done playing would ask if he could play. I'd imagine people with little brothers can relate. Anyway, he's standing in my doorway asking if he can watch. I said, "No dude, go away, I just want to play in peace." He kind of hung his head and was about to walk away defeated. Then I said, "Here, take this extra copy I got for you, happy birthday," and threw it at him. He started bawling, crying it was pretty awesome. He's a good kid, and that's one of his favorite series. TL got my brother a game, as a surprise made a huge 15-year-old cry. Finally, let's end with a story about Fred, a homeless man in college. When I was in college in Mass, there was a homeless guy that told me his name was Fred. You can always find him, as he was always in this roughly 4 to 5 block radius. It started by me bringing him McDonald's, then I'd asked him what he wanted to eat. And at first he would always say, "Man, it's your money, I'm not going to tell you what to do with it." After a year or so of me getting him food 3 to 4 times a week, I told him if he didn't tell me what he really wanted to eat, I wouldn't be buying him any more food at all. Which was a bluff, and I'm sure he knew it. It turned out he was from New York City and missed New York delis. He said, and I know this to be true because I loved it myself, you couldn't get anything close to a decent pastrami sandwich. I asked him where his favorite deli was, and he said Katz in New York City. Katz is where that scene in When Harry Met Sally, where Meg Ryan has that fake orgasm. This was exciting to me because Katz is my favorite too, and anyone that's ever been there knows their sandwiches are huge. So next time on my way back up to school, I bought for large pastrami on rye, put them in a cooler, then waited for it to get dark. I heat up one of the sandwiches in my toaster and microwave, bring it to him, and told him there are 3 more waiting for him when he wants them. That I just keep them cold for him and reheat. The way he looked at me as his eyes welled up with tears. The sheer happiness, surprise, disbelief, and shock still gives me goosebumps 12 years later. I'm not sure if he gave me that look because he liked the sandwich that much, or because if only for a brief moment I was able to give him a little bit of his old life back. Update. Fed a homeless man a meal he really wanted that brought tears to his eyes and still brings tears to mine even after 12 years.